Bruce! Deep entry! This is
Diane on the right.
And this is
No,
towards
there
the
was no
guest side.
harming.
Really, this is towards the
Jenny,
guest side too.
isn't there some glue in there?
I've always wanted to see this close.
I'm just stand here like this.
You're now.
Anyone that's going to sit with me at the desk beside you?
I think, which one is it?
Well,
No.
they want
We
to
don't
stand
wanna
behind
block
it if
this
someone
one.
can sit there.
Those chairs don't look comfortable.
Actually, they're not that bad.
Okay.
Have you tried
You know,
looking
so
around these?
often
No.
the first
Try
child
it.
gets all this stuff done, and later
Look how heavy
child,
those things are.
children, they never do it. I was the oldest in my family. I had baby shoes.
Fairly sturdy.
My brother and
No one
sister
else
did.
They all survived in atomic blast.
Nope, I'm fine.
Hey, Quinn. Your call for the TDS hotline about the consumers.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call Lord Wilson and get this thing.
And you thought it really did, it's fluffing up nice.
I know.
We got stragglers.
Hey, David, this intrigues me incredibly. This X-ray that says Los Angeles Angels.
And it blocks Fox's screen.
Well, the other attended a Christian Science school. You can't get much opposite poles there. Sharon, I believe, was the Christian Science.
So was there only one door in and out of the office, that one right there, in and out of this office?
Well, that door was created.
Right, but the one right
But that
behind
one
Bruce?
Went into the, no, when we get to that side of the room, we'll talk about
Okay.
how else, there are two doors on that side of the room. Okay, this is Walt's working office, and it was in here that he would spend his working day. He spent most of his time in here. You notice it's a very low desk. It's not a desk, it's a table. And I've seen a lot of pictures with him seated in the desk, with his feet up in the desk. So he liked to do that. And I think that's why he liked the low table here. All the materials that he was working on would be behind him. So in more of these cubby holes like he had in the other room there with the scripts that he was involved in. And again, all of his current projects would be right here where you could reach them. Now, we've got like the script for Happiest Millionaire here, which was one of the last things he was working on. The actual scripts that were here we have at the archives because they have his notes in them. So people that are doing research on the making of these films often need to see the scripts that were in his office. The items up here on top of this cabinet are all curiosities, little gifts that were given to Walt by various people. I mean, here's a, this is from Everett Dirksen, the senator. This is a shillelagh from Ireland. Irish shillelagh, it says on it. Possibly when they were making Darby O'Gill. A couple of guns here.
Negotiations.
Coins, ashtrays, a letter opener with a tooth of some sort of creature on the end of it. Piece of driftwood. I mean, you got a little of everything. Oh, Bambi's falling over.
They're not complete.
I don't think he's going to stand very well. He's going to fall again. He's very... he's got very skinny legs there. This motor of some sort.
The gold crown, was that given by the founder of Hallmark or was that by a relative?
This is from the founder, Joyce Hall, who was a good friend of Walt's. It said something on here. The best, no, to Walt Disney, the best known and most loved man in the world, with thanks from one of his young fans, Joyce Hall. Joyce, being a woman's name, is the name of the man who founded Hallmark. Hallmark was actually one of the earliest Disney licensees. They signed up with Disney, I think, in 1930 to do Mickey Mouse greeting cards. And the company was called Hall Brothers at that time, and they were located in Kansas City. So, of course, that Joyce Hall came from the same area where Walt did. So, naturally, they sort of gravitated together, and became quite good friends. This here is called Schedule and Cost Report. This is something that they used to put out weekly at the Disney studio, and it would list the films that were currently in production and give various information about it, who the producer was, who the director was, what date it started in camera, what date they did the rough cut, what date they did the music pickup, what date they did the re-recording, what date they did the negative cut, when they got the answer print. The answer print is the very final print showing that the film is ready to go out into the theaters. And then the budget, and then the total cost as of that date, and the estimated final cost. So Walt could keep up with all the projects that were going on in the studio, find out if they were under budget, if they were over budget, and how things were going. So they stopped doing this a few years ago, but we have many years worth of these schedule and cost reports. This is actually from 1967, so or 68, January 68. So this was probably when they closed up the office, January 19th, 1968. So the secretaries just continue to change those. Now, what do you see right here? Records. You have records. Where's your record player? Well, it was in this drawer. It's not there now. But this is where the record player was. In the ceiling, in both rooms, were speakers. So he could play his records here and listen to them in both rooms. In this box here, which was given to him, I don't know if I can open it. Looks like somebody's locked it. He had his glasses in there. And of course, this is his telephone pad where he has the phone numbers of all the people that he would be calling regularly. As I mentioned, this is his actual telephone. I'm glad to see they moved the briefcase back over here. It was sitting over there the last time I was here to visit the Walt Disney Store, and that's not correct.
It's easier for the guests to see.
What else can we talk about here? He used to have his favorite awards behind him, and the Oscar for the creation of Mickey Mouse was here. The Irving Thalberg Award, which was given to the best producer by the Motion Picture Academy. These two awards, I don't know why they're still here, his family didn't claim them. There was a beautiful Russian cut glass award that was up there. So these were all things that Walt really treasured, and those were the things that he kept behind him. What's one of the books here? The Heart of Our Cities. That's when he was starting to think about the problems of cities. Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. That was one of the last things he was thinking about, and there's the book that he was reading. The Year of the Horse by Eric Hatch. The Year of the Horse became The Horse in the Gray Flannel Suit, which was obviously one of the later films that he was working on. On the desk here, actually something's been swiped, but it was just a copy. This is a copy too. This is the notes that he had on his desk when he died, and you can see he's written down here on the bottom, Ron Miller, some various things that he might produce. 2, Way Down Cellar, a 2-part television show. We eventually did Way Down Cellar. 2, Kurt Russell. 3, CIA, Mobley. Roger Mobley was a young actor that he'd used in several of his television shows, and he eventually did a television production about the CIA with Roger Mobley. When Kurt Russell was at the studio filming Now You See Him, Now You Don't, I invited him up to Walt's offices and gave him a tour here and showed him that one of the last things that Walt had written down on his desk was Kurt's name, and I think Kurt was quite impressed. One thing that was here, and it's not anymore, unless it's gotten buried somewhere, was the Epcot, the final Epcot proposal, the script for the Epcot film. We do have the original at the studio, so we can make a copy of that. It was also the top page copied on here. Oh, here it is. Got buried. Also, his notes. He couldn't spell. Biscuit eater, misspelled biscuit. But that, of course, is another film that we made very shortly after he died. On the wall there, of course, a plot plan for Disneyland. This is when the construction was being done of Pirates of the Caribbean, which you can see there on the left. That's how we date that picture. Which plot plan is that for Walt Disney World?
The third.
The third?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It went up to about 16 before the final plot plan was done. The portrait there of Ed Wynn, who was one of Walt's favorite actors, was taken by Dave Iwerks, the son of Iwerks. The 4 pictures of the interior of the company plane, that's the Grumman Gulfstream that is now on display down at the Disney MGM Studios. We don't use it anymore, it just got too old. But this is the plane, the third plane that the company purchased. And was the one that was being used at the time Walt died. I did fly to Florida a couple of times in that plane. If you look in the second photograph, the seat on the right side there, the tan seat, yes, that was Walt's seat. And on the wall there beside him is an altimeter, an airspeed indicator, and a telephone where he could talk to the pilot. So he was very fascinated with flight, and occasionally would even go up and take the controls, much to the dismay of Lily. Up there beside Ginny is a autographed, well, an autograph and a photograph of John Singleton Mosby. Anybody know who that was?
Civil War General.
Colonel. He was Mosby's Marauders, he was a cavalry officer during the Civil War on the Union side, and very adept at his work. And we made a 3-part television show called Willie and the Yank about Mosby. It was later released abroad as a theatrical feature called Mosby's Marauders, but somebody gave Walt an autographed picture of Mosby, and so he has it hanging here in his office.
Is that very valuable?
Mosby's autograph is not terribly valuable because he lived until the next century even. I would say it's probably worth a couple $100. Interesting autograph behind, or next to Ginny over on this side. This is Maurice Chevalier, the actor, dressed in his priest robes as he appeared in Monkeys Go Home. And he's written here to Walt Disney, and part of this is in French. Avec mon absolution, with my absolution for what? Absolving you of all your sins, past, present, and future, essentially. Father Maurice Chevalier. He signed it in 1961. So he was one of Walt's favorites, like Ed Wynn. And the fun story about Maurice Chevalier that I'm aware of when I started at the studio was when the Aristocats was in production. And Bill Anderson was the producer of the film involved with the Aristocats. And he wanted someone, French essentially, to sing the title song under the credits. And they asked Maurice Chevalier if he would do that. Now, Maurice Chevalier had been retired for a number of years. Maurice agreed to do it. And he wrote Bill Anderson a letter that we have in the archives now. And he said in that letter that I wouldn't have done this for anybody else in the world except for Walt Disney. I will come out of retirement and I will sing that song for you. And it was really a wonderful song and a real wonderful opening for that film, and wonderful to get Marie Chevalier to do it. And we're so pleased to have that that letter in the archives too.
Which film was this?
Nothing happens. But in the old days, if you push that black button behind the window there, we'll have the photograph. Sure, pass the photograph over. It would open the door on Walt's kitchen, little kitchenette. See it there? So this couch here was sitting in front of a room divider that had this glass above it, and behind it you would walk over to the door that was back here that would go into Walt's bedroom. Here was a door, which would be there, that would go out, and then you'd come around into the side and into this kitchen. But this door was electrically operated, and I had so much fun pushing that button and having the door open and close when I was in here. And it still worked fine when I was in here. And his secretary would sometimes fix him a small lunch in there, or he'd have a cocktail in the afternoon after he finished work or something. And I've seen a number of pictures of him standing up at the open door there with some of his visitors, enjoying a cocktail in the late afternoon or something.
So the entrance to actually come into the office is behind where the couch was? Or
no, that was the bedroom.
Oh,
so that would be Walt's private entrance. Nobody else would have gone there. The main entrance is over here. Actually, it's just to the right of that. It was on the right side.
Did the other office have a doorway?
Yes, over in the far corner. I should have brought the photos of all the ante-rooms also. That would have been interesting for you to see next time I do this. Well,
Next time.
remind me to bring all the photos, Jenny. But as you can see, it looks almost exactly the same as it does now.
Are there any recollections of a working meeting here? Anybody telling the story of?
Well, there's certainly a lot of pictures of meetings taking place in this office. So I haven't talked to people that explained anything about a meeting going on in here, but I'm sure a lot of them took place.
Did we tell the window crank story yet?
The what?
About the window crank when Walt got
Oh. There's a story in one of the biographies that he spent the night up here once, and I don't know if he'd had an argument with Lily or what, but the air conditioning went off, and he got so riled that he couldn't get the window crank to open the window, and he threw a chair through the window. You can see the crank over there. That's what originally opened the windows.
I suppose when you own the company, you can do that.
I guess.
Who's been sending it?
I had a question on the year of this photograph here, whether it was 64, 65, or whether it was continued being used.
The aerial you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'd really have to study it to tell what exactly was the date on it. It would depend on what attractions were there and what were still open, and I mean it's pointing out it's a small world that's not there yet, but it's
Mary
going to
Poppins
be.
came out in what, 64, right?
Right.
And the proceeds from Mary Poppins is what helped construct New Orleans Square?
The proceeds from Mary Poppins, first off, built Maypo, which was named after Mary Poppins, which was the subsidiary, really, of Walt Disney Imagineering, which constructed a lot of the things for the parks. I've never heard that was specifically responsible for New Orleans Square, except it very well could have been, because Mary Poppins made an awful lot of money, and it certainly helped Walt do a lot of things that he wanted to do, and New Orleans Square was one of them.
David, I know you said that Walt was somewhat either shy or reserved or modest. But I'm sure he must have understood his own importance. I mean, here was a company that was named after him, and people who would, ask for his autograph and want to take his photograph when he came to Disneyland and whatnot.
But he would forget things like that. I've read a story which I thought was very telling about him, and this was very late in his life. He was walking down Hollywood Boulevard and passed some car emporium where they had this fancy sports car in the window, and he was walking by and mumbled to himself, I wish I could afford a car like that. He suddenly came to the realization, I can afford a car like that. So, I mean, he never did consider himself important or rich or anything like that.
Dave, I had a question. These scripts here, were those the names of the scripts he was working on, the final ones, or are they just...
Are there
where they
actual
put
names
them?
on there?
Yeah, there's Zorro up in the cabinet there. And
Yeah.
No Mobile.
Right. Those would be the ones.
So they just weren't thrown there for shows. What?
Right. No, we didn't change any of the labels.
Was there a separation between television projects or movie projects?
No, he was involved in both at the same time, so I don't think he differentiated too much between the two.
Did movies and TV, was that a congenial studio existence? Was
Well,
there much competition?
I'm sure you wouldn't hear that from the people that worked in each of those areas. I mean, the animators themselves felt quite lost when he had all these other toys to play with, when he had Disneyland to play with, when he had television to play with, because they weren't getting his advice as much as they had been used to. And that was one of the main reasons why it took so long to make Sleeping Beauty. He was just spreading himself so thin with all these different projects.
Dave, I love the inscription on the books, that set of books. Can you share that story and read that inscription?
Jenny was telling me the story, and I never heard that story myself, so Jenny, tell the story.
It's the complete works of Hans Christian Andersen. It was translated into English for the first time by Jean Herschel, and the inscription
He was an
reads,
actor.
Dear Walt, took 10 years, I'm proud of the job, hope someday to see a combination of your art and Andersen stories.
Of course, we did The Ugly Duckling, which was an Andersen story. But other than that, it was Danny Kaye that made the Hans Christian Andersen story for another studio.
Now, Jean Herschel, is that the same actor that was the grandfather in Heidi? In the film Heidi?
Oh, I don't know that, but he was a very prominent early actor in Hollywood
That probably is him.
before my time.
The Shirley Temple version of Heidi.
What about all the little scrolls of paper down below?
Blueprints of various projects that he was working on.
Dare we
I don't know.
are they
Let's
look at
frontal?
Let's look at one and see what it is.
So those are not copies, those are
This is
originals?
actually a drawing.
Oh,
Christmas one!
Oh, it's from Tammy.
This
Tammy,
is
one of his
Grandpa's.
grandchildren.
Oh, take a picture, take a picture or something.
All right.
Don't let Tammy know about that.
Tammy should have that.
No, we'll keep it.
That is so special.
Wow.
So what else you got down there?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Blueprint.
Ooh, hey.
Did his granddaughter do that one too?
A little later on,
Yeah.
when we're drafting classes.
Floor plans for a house. Oh.
Diana Miller's house. I think I read somewhere where he started designing the
Mammoth
home.
Mountain Club. This is a up at it's a mountain cabin up at Mammoth.
Vacation getaway.
So those are all original
Yeah.
and not copies?
Right.
Was there any particular reason why, when he became so ill, that was really kind of shrouded from the public, that they talked about more the polo injury and that type of thing? I mean, did it have to do
Well-
with stock, or did it have to do with just his image in the public, or?
Part of it was, of course, the company not wanting the stock to fall, but so much of this happened within a very short time. I mean, he discovered only, I think it was October of '66, that he had cancer. I mean, he'd gone into the hospital to have a neck injury worked on. He'd had a neck injury since he played polo in the early days, and he was thinking, well, maybe he needed to have an operation. And they took an X-ray, and they found a spot on his lung, which was cancerous, and eventually removed his lung. And he just went downhill very quickly after that. By December, he died.
He spent his last
Yeah.
birthday in the hospital.
Yeah. I mean, he was out of the hospital for several weeks and went back in again. It was sad, and I mean, I remember I was working at UCLA Library, and I was working at the reference desk that day, and I remember coming back from lunch, and somebody said, "Oh, did you hear Walt Disney just died?" And that, I don't remember that of many other people. I mean, I remember when Kennedy died, and I remember when a few other famous people died, but Walt Disney made an impression on me, and I think it did on a lot of people too. If you ever want to be really sad and have tears come to your eyes, we have the actual tape recording of the flag lowering ceremony at Disneyland on December 15th, 1966. And they played When You Wish Upon a Star. And it's made the announcement. It's very sad. Any other questions?
Too depressed right now.
Yeah, they weren't sure at the time what to do, whether to keep the park open, whether to close the studio.
Right,
or
and
whatever.
they felt, and rightly so, that people have driven many miles or flown many miles to get here to see Disneyland, and Walt would have liked them to have the chance to see the park. So
Now, the services that they have are more private, correct?
Yes, and that was part of the reason why these rumors started later on about the Frozen and all that sort of thing.
Is there a list of the people who attended those services?
I've never seen anything. It's pretty much family. I mean, the employees at the studio didn't go. It was held in one of the little chapels at Forest Lawn in Glendale.
Now, when you had a chance to come into the offices and start your researching, and you had a chance to go over to his briefcase and open it, were there any?
I don't think it was. I don't think there was anything in it. There isn't today either. But that's what he would carry scripts home in.
So it was empty when you got to it.
Did he have a separate briefcase, a different one that was just for scripts, and then another one that maybe he used?
I've never seen any others. I mean, Lily's given us things from time to time that she's found in the house, but no other briefcases have come our way.
What, for example, has she given?
Oh, bank books and correspondence. Oh, she found a whole sheaf of letters that he wrote to her when he was in New York recording Steamboat Willie. And it is the most fascinating series of letters because it's detailed documentation on all the problems that he was going through trying to get that first Mickey Mouse cartoon recorded. And it made me think, why wasn't he away from home for so many of the other major things in his life so he could be writing home to his wife and have all this documentation? We just don't have it for many other elements of his life. But that one couple-month period when he's back in New York, and he's writing her almost every night because he was so lonely. He'd get back to his hotel and nothing to do except sit down at a typewriter, and he did type. He typed these letters himself and wrote these lengthy letters home to Lily telling her just what was going on and all the problems he was having, but how enthused he was and how he felt that this new sound cartoon was really going to establish him in business, and it was going to really enable them to get the studio going and make lots of money. And oh, he was just so enthused about this whole thing of synchronized sound cartoons. And of course, it proved true.
Why is it that Mickey Mouse, since we just had his birthday, we were kind of having a debate on, well, how old is he? Is he 69 or 70? Because
70's next year.
Well, but technically there were 2 films before.
Right.
Steamboat Willie,
Right.
so.
We have always, from the very beginnings of the company, stated that Mickey was born when the public first saw the film. And the first film that the public was able to see was Steamboat Willie. Plain Crazy and Galloping Gaucho, which were filmed before were filmed as silent films. Walt was unable to sell them. Nobody wanted another series of silent films, and so he determined to make Steamboat Willie as a sound cartoon, and figuring that he could get that one out and people would then buy his series. And it proved true, and then of course he went back and added sound to the 2 earlier cartoons, and they were released later.
Oh, I see.
So they didn't get released before Steamboat Willie. So November 18th, 1928 was when Steamboat Willie opened at the Colony Theater in New York.
Is that a decision that Walt made about him wanting it to be just the ones with sound to be recognized as his first film?
You mean why that date was chosen? I don't know. It was in early press releases stating that Mickey was born at the Colony Theater in New York. Now, they never set the date. They never told a date in those early press releases. And when I got to the archives, we'd get calls from the press in October and September when they had read that this was Mickey's birthday. And what had happened back in the 1930s, they would have like a 7th birthday party or a 9th birthday party for Mickey Mouse. And they'd pick a nice Saturday in the fall when they could get a lot of kids out into the movie theaters, and that would be Mickey's birthday. And some of those dates were sort of made their way into reference books. But still, every single time when they talked about it, they talked about Mickey being born when Steamboat Willie opened at the Colony Theater. Well, nobody had ever bothered to look up and find out when Steamboat Willie opened at the Colony Theater. And so that was one of my early projects in the archives, was to discover when that date was. And it wasn't too hard to come up with. We found reviews of the film when it opened. And eventually I found the actual program for that night at the Colony Theater, which Walt had in one of the publicity files. And so we started around 1974 or 5 sending out press releases saying that November 18th is Mickey's birthday. And I've been promoting that ever since. And so every book that I've had anything to do with or proofread since that time in the last 20 years has had November 18th as Mickey's birthday. So I'm always kind of proud of that I'm the one that said Mickey's birthday.
I have a question about that feature, and I went round and round with my roommate, but she was working in Toontown, and before you see Mickey, you see these previews of his features, and the announcer says, Mickey in Steamboat Willie. And a little boy asked her, now who is Steamboat Willie? Is it actually Mickey Mouse or is it the steamboat? And I kept saying, well, I'm just, yeah, it's probably the character. I mean, they're probably
Steamboat Willie is the character that Mickey was playing in the film. And it actually came from it was a takeoff on a Buster Keaton film, which was called Steamboat Bill, which had been made a little earlier. And so Steamboat Willie was just sort of a takeoff on that. And as Walt did with a lot of his early films, Plane Crazy was Lindbergh, and Galloping Gaucho was Douglas Fairbanks. So that was very common with cartoon producers in those days.
Is that sketch in the other case of Steamboat Willie, is that a reproduction where Jose is?
The animation
I don't remember it.
has a sketch of Steamboat Willie.
Top left-hand corner there.
I don't remember what it is. It may be one of the animation drawings. We have all of the animation drawings for Steamboat Willie, as well as the script that Walt had in his desk.
I guess I always want to know, is it an original, is it a copy?
Well, I'll have to go out there and look at it.
Okay.
I don't remember. It's been so long since we put that display in.
Now, I heard
It's
a
probably
story.
original.
I heard a story that Plane Crazy was released for a couple of evenings at some little theater on Sunset
It was
Boulevard.
previewed. It was never released. It
And it
was
was
shown.
To the general public.
It was shown so that they could get a reaction, as we did many of our cartoons. Snow White previewed on December 6th in Pomona. So it showed like
Lucky people.
two weeks before it opened at the Carthay Circle Theater. But they've never considered these previews as releases.
Whatever happened to the garage that they started the studio? Does that actually belong to someone now?
See, that's a myth too, and that's why the company didn't want to buy it when it came up for sale. This garage was located behind his Uncle Robert's home over on Kingswell Avenue. And it was in this garage that he put together his camera stand and built the camera stand for his camera. But when he actually started the studio, it was a couple of blocks down the street, also on Kingswell, in the back half of a real estate office. So that was really the first studio, not the garage. Even in some of our early books, and this was again where the mythology sort of sounded better to the publicists, and they said Walt got his start in a garage. And so the garage picture is prominently featured in a lot of our early books, but it didn't really have that much significance.
So it was just merely a
But
place where they set
what happened was in the mid-70s or late 70s, that house, whoever was living in the house wanted to tear the garage down. It was too small to put a car in. I mean, it was a little tiny thing. And a Disney fan bought the house and garage, but decided that he wanted to make some money off the garage, so he wanted to sell the garage. Offered it to the studio. The studio was not interested. We had no place really to display it, and we didn't think it really had the significance that they felt it had. Eventually, when nobody wanted to buy it, it didn't meet a minimum bid at their auction they held. There were about 13 or 14 people that gathered together, each put up something like $1,000 and bought that garage. One of them was a Disneyland employee, his name was Alan Adler. One of them was Bobby Sherman, the singer. There were several of them that got together and bought this garage. Well, then they couldn't find a home for it either. They wanted to give it to the Smithsonian didn't want it. They wanted to give it to the LA County Museum, the LA County Museum didn't want it. Eventually, they gave it to the Garden Grove Historical Society, and it's located there today.
So that is authentic.
Oh, it is?
It was a
The
real
one right off
garage.
of Euclid in China?
Yes.
Close the lawn.
That is so
Drive by
interesting.
there every day.
I've never been there to see it, but I've seen pictures of it there. And some Disney collectors have donated or loaned material that I think they have on display. And so.
Has there been any thought to reproduce these offices at Walt Disney World, or was this
Was
always
never
going to be?
never been suggested.
I'm curious about why they took out Walt Disney Story at, in Florida. I heard that they took it out.
Nobody ever found it. It wasn't in as obvious a place as here at Disneyland. I don't know how many of you have been on Main Street at Walt Disney World, but it was set back from the street. You have to walk down 30 feet down a covered pergola to get to the door to it. Nobody ever found it. Even when they put prominent signs out in front, it had very few people ever in the Walt Disney Story, and so they felt the space was just wasted. And they had a number of ideas about enhancing it, and finally they just decided to close it.
What's there now?
Right now, they've still got a few of the displays still in there, and they're using it, I think, for annual passport sign-ups.
Well, we have
The
to
ultimate
display this.
Steve, are there any plans here at Disneyland to expand the Walt Disney Story?
Not that I've heard, and I've heard the opposite.
Really?
I mean, very often people talk about, let's get rid of it. Dick Nunes never liked the Walt Disney Story. He never liked the offices here. He felt they wasted space.
Oh.
So we fought to keep it here. I shudder to think what would happen if they decided to take this away, because where would we put all this stuff?
What was a typical day like for Walt? What time did he usually start?
He
What time
started
did
very
end?
early and he stayed very late. He was very involved in things that were going on in the studio, especially in the early days. I mean, he would wander around into the various artists' offices before they got into the office, and they'd often come back and find something pinned up on their bulletin board or their drawing board that was down in the wastebasket, and he said, "Why do you throw away the good stuff?" So he was very involved and did like to go snoop around and see what everybody was doing. Later in his life, of course, he got so busy that he didn't have the chance to do that as much as anyone who's running a major corporation.
From the individual who would know.
We know that one of Walt's favorite foods was a grilled cheese sandwich. Do you know what else he
In here meeting with the people that were wanting to do business with the company, or meeting with his artists or designers or whatever, working on the various projects. And so I would think in his later years, probably the last 5 years of his life,